Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Saturday, June the 15th, 2024. We've been talking this week about the book of Revelation, and it kind of shifted into a discussion of how the books of the Bible got included in the Bible, even some discussion about why some were not. And I wasn't planning on this until the last day or so. Saw a couple of headlines, maybe you've seen them too. The one said, this was from the CBS News. Newly deciphered manuscript is the oldest written record of Jesus Christ's childhood, experts say. And it is from something called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. Until now, it was believed, according to the articles, the earliest version was from about the 11th century, but this one document that they have studied here recently is dated from between the 4th and 5th centuries. But it had been ignored for a very long time because in the past researchers deemed it to be insignificant. Another article was entitled, Overlooked Museum Scrap Turns Out to Be Earliest Account of Jesus' Childhood. Now that's misleading because that makes it sound like a true story, right? But here's some of the things. The story that's contained on this small piece of document has Jesus playing beside a rushing stream where he molds 12 sparrows from the soft clay that he finds in the sand, in the mud. And when his father rebukes him, Joseph that is, for playing around on the Sabbath, the 5-year-old Jesus claps his hands and brings the clay figures to life. Again, it's from this document that's called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, not to be confused with another apocryphal. Remember, the word apocryphal means hidden or secret. There was a Gospel of Thomas. There was a lot of sayings of Jesus. This is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which apparently tells stories about Jesus's childhood, and kind of was tacked on, or tells things about what happened to Jesus before the famous story in the Gospel of Luke when he was 12 years old. But it's believed that it came from the late 2nd century, although scholars, Irenaeus almost immediately felt that it was spurious and not to be trusted. Again, it describes the life of Jesus from the ages of 5 to 12 with fanciful, sometimes malevolent, supernatural events. He's presented as this precocious child, and how he learns to use his powers eventually for good. But before that happens, one of the episodes, the one that apparently was uncovered on this ancient piece that was apparently in a museum or something that they just hadn't really, that they just kind of really ignored up to this point, makes these clay birds that he brings to life. But then there's other stories where Jesus kills a child and causes the child's body to wither into a corpse. Later, he kills another child when they apparently bumped into Jesus or threw a stone at him or punched Jesus, depending on the translation. When Joseph and Mary's neighbors complain, Jesus miraculously strikes them blind. He then starts receiving lessons, but he turns the tables and starts to teach the teacher instead. They try to, subsequently he resurrects a friend who was killed when he falls from a roof, heals another who cut his foot with an axe. This is a story of healing his brother who's bitten by a snake, and 2 others who died from different causes. And finally, the text ends in the episode that is actually in Luke when Jesus is 12 teaching in the temples. Really far out stuff. I remember hearing about the story of a child falling from the roof. Maybe I'm misremembering, but it was the version I heard was that Jesus got mad at the kid, pushed him off, the kid fell down, died, and Jesus went down and brought him back to life. Obviously, Infancy Gospel of Thomas, like the Gospel of Thomas, neither one of them made it into the Bible. And maybe this is a good time to review what we talked about. How were the decisions made? Because there were all these writings, apocryphal, meaning hidden or secret writings out there that were read and had some readership in ancient times, and even in the ancient church, but were not deemed to be appropriate or to make the cut, if you will, to be in the Bible. So let's go back those three things. I think I talked about them yesterday. The first thing to determine whether a book made it into the Bible or not was authorship. It had to be tied to somebody important. Now, Infancy Gospel Thomas. Thomas, of course, was one of the disciples. But there's no indication. We don't know a lot about Thomas, although some of the things that he said are recorded in the Gospel of John. But we don't know much about Thomas. We certainly don't know when he met Jesus, and there's certainly no tradition that he knew Jesus as a child. So how would it be that he could tell stories? If it was Thomas writing it, of course, could he tell stories about Jesus? The second the second criterion was its age. The older texts taking priority. Well, this came from the end of the 2nd century, or almost 100 years after the Gospel, or the 100 years after the book of Revelation, which we pretty much believe to be the last book of the Bible written. So there's nothing after the year 100, nothing else after that point. Even though there were all kinds of writings that emerged, none of them made it into Scripture, partly because they didn't have that, they weren't that old first layer of tradition that tied back to those earliest times. And then the third point was, how well did it reflect correct teaching and the teaching of the church? Well, these fanciful stories about a precocious Jesus killing kids and bringing them back to life and blinding parents and all that kind of nonsense, forgive me for saying that, just doesn't fit anything else that we know about Jesus and about the Bible. So, long story short, these headlines sound great. Oh, stories of Jesus' childhood uncovered, experts say. Well, yeah, they found the document from, years and years and years later, and multiple copies. So if it was written at the end of the 2nd century, and the oldest known versions, including this one, is from the 4th or 5th century, how many times was that copied and maybe changed even in the transmission of it? Again, this is a good example of the kinds of things, fanciful things that were written and were appropriately not included in the Bible. And so when you see a headline like that, it sounds exciting for a minute, but when you stop and think about it, was it written by one of the disciples or the apostles or the school of students of theirs? Is it an old tradition? Does it go back to the very beginning of the church? Does it reflect Christian teaching? In many cases, if not, well, I'll say virtually in every case, these other writings don't fulfill any of those three things. And so, quite appropriately, the early church left them out, and for good reason. Well, that's probably more than you wanted to know, but thought I'd kind of bring it with something that's currently in the news. Maybe it caught your eye, the stories as well. Well, that ends our week of daily devotions. Hope you can be with us in church tomorrow, and I'll be back with you again on Tuesday for a new week of daily devotions. Until then, have a great day today and take care. Bye.